So on this FOF, it actually has a device, a place holding device where this fits underneath here, where the foot fits to stabilize it. And unfortunately, you guys didn't get this. And then the piece that is the flatbed has a place in back for the flatbed to rest. So I've taken the flatbed off. This is the back of the machine. This is the presser foot bar. So you can see my presser foot is going up and down here. Let me just get you a little closer. So this is different. Some people's just flip up and down. This one happens to go to the side. A couple of other differences with this machine is these fold up. This is the thread spool. You can see them right here. For travel mode and for sewing mode, one spool, one post for 2 threads. The very top of the machine is where we have our bobbin winder and also the latch that will hold the bobbin in place. And the post so that the thread can wrap around and go to the bobbin on top and lock it in place. All right. Going to get a color of thread that you'll be able to see on my gold fabric. So I'm going to work here. Our sewing machine repair guy left these all wound up, which is tidy, but I don't think this is the best way to leave. I don't think this is the best way to leave the machine because and the wire, because it tends to bend the wire. I think just loosely going around the foot is less intensive on your wire. So if you go this way, it's not bending it or giving a crimp to the wire. This is this presser foot. So this is how I will engage the machine. And it's less like a gas pedal than my Bernina, which I was using, which looks just like a gas pedal. And I press it this way, okay? The presser, the gas pedal or the accelerator pedal just plugs in. Some of you have 2 plugs, so one for the power and one for the pedal. Some of you have 1 plug. So this one happens to have 1 plug. This is my Edison cord. This needs to go to an electrical outlet so that I have power. And sometimes you'll have one of the polarized plugs so that you'll have to make it go into your outlet the correct way. And I will crawl on the floor and get this set up. One thing that you'll want to do, so you see my light came on, so I have power. Here's my light. Here's my on-off switch. One thing you'll want to do is make sure that you have downloaded your buttonhole guide. So this one has a buttonhole guide right here. And I'm just going to see if I can make that work. I think I can, so we'll get to that in a minute. I will tell you, I've never worked on one of these machines before, so this will be an experiment. And let me get my scissors. So you'll notice that this does not have a nice tidy scissor clip right there, but I do have a bobbin case that has a flipper that I can open out, just like every bobbin case. And then I have my bobbin. And this is gooey. So you guys, these were serviced, and you do need to have oil in your machine. Your working parts should have oil. This one has been sitting, and I think it has just a little too much oil. Let me get a wipe. One reason why I know you can hand wind a bobbin is because if you only have one bobbin, you are somewhat at a disadvantage, because it's great to be able to have bobbins in every color. But you should never wind new thread over old thread, because when you get it together, you will have a interruption in your sewing, and then that will cause a big knot to happen at the bottom of your sewing right here. So if you're going to change thread color, you need to unwind this. And we keep empty spools around, like that have an empty spool, and we just wind it back up in here and we can use it for hand sewing. Okay, so this is a little trick of, if you have an interest in, you should be able to thread your machine easily, but until you get used to that, you can just keep a piece of thread up here. I'm unwinding my thread so that I can put my spool on, and I can tie this in a knot. On industrial machines, we do this all the time. So this is tied in a knot. I just did a square knot, right? And I can pull this through my machine. So I'm just pulling my thread, and it will pull. This comes from the back, spool unspools to the left, through the tension device here, which is horizontal, down through this this take-up lever. This is actually another tension spring. Let me just show you. Through the take-up lever, which is in the upright position. And remember, this is in the upright position, which makes your needle in the upright position. And it's coming through a thread guide. It's in the front. So this is showing me that this is going to thread front to back, okay? Again, this spool unspools, goes across the machine to the left, draws to the left, goes down, up, down. Almost all machines do exactly the same thing. They all go down through a tension device, down through another one, up, and then back down again. Some go this way, and some go this way. So this one makes a V. You can see here's the V before it makes the downward motion. And then it gets threaded front to back. Here's my knot. I don't know if you can see that, but here's my knot. So I have my thread hanging here, and now I can just cut it off. So it's threaded. Some people panic about threading a machine. And if you were in person, you would, at your midterm, have to be able to thread your machine. Okay. And remember, this bobbin happens to go in clockwise. So it will unspool to the right, like this. And I'm going to put it on the post, put the whole of the spool on the post. The only machines that I know that are spooling to the left are the Brother machine and that old Singer, because the thread guide is here on the side, the thread guide is not in the front. If the thread guide is on the side, that means your long groove of your needle will go on this left side. This is my long groove of my needle, it goes in the front. And maybe if I have my light, you'll be able to see. So I'll show you that. Remember, this is also from the video, but I'm going to show you so hopefully you can see it. So here's my thread guide right in the front. Here's the long groove, and I'm going to thread right through this hole front to back. If you have a thread guide on the side, your long groove of your needle will be here, and then you'll thread this way. This is my needle tightening screw on this side, right on the other side of the bar. This is the needle tightening screw, and this is what you'll need to engage to get your needle in and out. So I'm going to show you how to do that as well. If you break a needle, you'll really want to have that skill. You need to have a screwdriver, a smallish screwdriver, not micro small, like not as small as eyeglasses small. We have a little toolbox that we have for the machines, but sometimes we have a baggie. Wait, here's one. And this is just labeled, it's just a baggie, so that all the tools are in there. Lefty right, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So this one I'm unscrewing towards me. I can slide the needle out. One thing that you need to know about the needle is the long groove side is opposite a flat edge. So you can see this is a flat edge. Let me hold it in front of there. This is flat. If I go to the side, you see flat and rounded. On this part of the needle, it tells you the size your needle. It tells you the size or the diameter of this needle. So you don't want to be working with too big of a needle, nothing bigger than a 14, particularly with the fabrics we've sent. And I doubt I can read this one. It's really small right here. So that would be a project for younger eyes. So I'm going to put the flat groove side to the back and the long groove side to the front. So I put it right up into my needle bar by holding it. So you need to know this if you break a needle. And then if you break a needle, I'll show you what to buy. So it will slide up in there, and then you tighten it in place with your screwdriver. So it's really snug. You don't want that falling out while you're sewing. And again, you don't want to crank it too hard that you strip the inside of this screw. Okay, my take-up lever is in the full upright position, so now I'm going to thread front to back. I put my finger back there so that I can see the hole. And I'm through my hole, I'll pull it through. Okay. And now I'm going to put my bobbin in. Again, if I hold the flipper up, it should not fall out so that I can secure it. Remember, on this machine, the top of the bobbin is this hole. On some machines, there's a little finger here as well. And that indicates the top, but the hole indicates the top. If I unspool this, it should go to the right. So that's clockwise. And it gets threaded through the slot, up over the spring right here, and through this hole so that I have about 6 inches of thread. Now I turn it so that it faces the machine. This hole is at the top, and I grab the lever. And I can put it right in place into my bobbin case. Let me see if I can have you guys see this a little better. Here's my bobbin case. I'm putting it straight in. And then this should snap in place. Yeah, this one didn't snap. Let's see if we can get it to snap. The other ones did. Most machines do, but this one may not actually do it. So I can tell it's in because I can pull on my thread. Okay, in order to engage the bobbin thread with the top thread, I hold my top thread in my hand. I turn my wheel one time towards me. I'm going to do it from the back so you see it's going towards me, and I'm holding my top thread. That will engage the bobbin. You can see it's pulling it right up. So here's my thread up on the top. I close my little case. All right. I'm going to put my flatbed on. It just slides right on and has 2 holes that it goes in. So that what that does is creates a flat sewing surface. And then I move, okay, that's interesting. The slot in the foot is to the side. So I want to put everything through that slot and have it come to the back. Okay. I'm going to lift the camera just a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. So this is the time where you will unpin those little pieces from your instruction, your contents sheet. You have a sew through button, which we'll talk about in a moment, and you have a piece of Velcro. And the Velcro has, as we discussed, both the hook, and you can see the hook there, and the loop, which is the fuzzier side. That's how it works. And even this small piece, you can hear how loud it is. So that's why we don't use it often for quick changes, but it is very durable. And that's why it would work if the inside of the space cavity was the loop so that you can touch it, and the bottom of their shoes had this Velcro on it, then they could walk all over. Okay, I have this piece. I'm going to put it on vertically onto my small strip. Again, which goes top and bottom. This is a big controversy, as with all closures, but I'm going to place this against what would be the body so that it's not going to scratch if it gets out of place and tries to connect with something. This is really important if it's at the back neck, not so important really in center front. The most important thing I want to do is make sure that my fabric stays completely aligned to make my good center front closure. So here's my hook and bar. I need to make sure that my Velcro is concealed in here. I'm going to do just a trial. That looks good. I don't see it, and my fabric will close smoothly. So I can actually align this piece of Velcro and pin that in place. It's not a bad idea, as I told Cara, to just hand stitch that, because if you hand stitch it, you'll be certain that it's straight. I mean, by hand stitching, I mean basting. You'll be sure it's straight, and then you don't have to worry about trying to jump over a needle with a pin with your needle. And sometimes with the stiffness of the Velcro and the pin, that can be difficult. So I'm just going to use my hand sewing needle, pull a little tail so I have it in basting mode. And don't think that basting is a waste of time. Often it saves you time. I really encourage you to hand baste your final closure of your zipper for sure. So I'm going to put this on the back because it doesn't matter. I'm going to take it out. And I'm stitching. I'm just going to push this through. So yeah, easier said than done. And you'll see that on the side of your Velcro, I'm going to leave a 3-inch loop right here, just a string. On the side of your Velcro, there's a little bit of a non-looped area. That's what I'm going to be sewing through. So I want to make sure I'm straight. And I'm going to just do a couple basting stitches here. Remember, that's just in, out to secure this. And then the other thing about Velcro, I mean, you can backstitch it on, or you can stitch it so that we don't see much on the outside, but you see as much stitching on the outside as you do on the inside. So it's kind of ugly, particularly for, you know, unless you're making an industrial garment. I'm just going to turn this over to continue my basting. Unless you're making an industrial garment and you're going to see the Velcro and you don't care. Stitching the Velcro is kind of ugly, but it can be a choice. So I don't need to go all the way around. I'm going to go 3 sides. And then I'm going to stick through the back so that I'm not going to have a long thread hanging. And here I'll clip, and you see that I have these 2 threads hanging. Now I can take my pin out. The thing that's good about that is I can now measure my top piece and make sure that it's even. So what I'm looking at is making sure that exactly the same width is sticking out on this side, which I think is 3/8, all the way down. And at the top of my Velcro, which I can feel right here, I'm going to put a pin so that I know exactly where to put my top piece. Okay, so there's the top of my Velcro. Yes, indeed, it's right there. Here's my pin. So now I can align my Velcro directly opposite it by lining it up with that pin. So here it is, nice and even, and I will be able to have it concealed. So again, I can pin that, or if you feel comfortable, you can just hold it in place, keeping the lines parallel to the edge of your garment. The vertical line of the Velcro parallel to the edge of your garment. I'll do a couple of quick basting stitches here. Again, leaving a thread tail. As your thread gets shorter, you have to remember to not pull on that tail or it will come all the way through. So I'm just going to do a couple stitches just to keep it in place. I'm stitching right along my thread mark. You can see both the pin and my thread here. So I'm lining it up with that pin. Turn it over, a couple more stitches. And now it's secure and I do not need to worry about sewing over a pin or is it going to be even, because I can do a sample right now. I can test it and take a look. So I'm going to pull that out and cut this off. Put my thread to the side. So I have my 2 pieces. Remember, I can tell my top from the bottom because I have my interfacing on the top. So this is my side that's going against the body and I can just put it in place. Here's my pin marking it and it is very secure. I can see it in there. Now, when you undo this piece, you have to be careful that you don't undo the basting. So you have to pull it right on the garment, okay? Now, all I'm gonna do, zip, 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 and stitch around. So I hope I have my machine threaded correctly. That's what this little piece of thread is, this little piece of fabric is for, is to do a check to make sure that your machine is threaded correctly. So I'm just gonna push this down on my presser foot, make sure that I'm on 3.5, 2.5. Let's see, this goes up to 8, so maybe I wanna be on, let me try 4. Here's my needle bar position. I can see that I'm going to be in the center. And everybody can tell where their center of their needle is. If you have needle positions, you want to find that out. This is my back stitch because I have my little U-turn arrow right there. I'm just going to test this by stitching forward. I have to figure out how to make this petal work for me. So I'm going to stitch forward. Okay, I see that it's on straight stitch to zigzag, and it's doing exactly that. So I'm going to put this on straight stitch. Which would be right here. So at 4, I start going into zigzag. So I'm going to actually put it right to that 2.5 and check that out. That's not doing exactly what I want, so I'm going to try this. Okay, that's definitely the buttonhole. And I'll go here. Okay, that's interesting. Alrighty. Let's try this. Okay. Let me see if this will work if I'm on straight this way. And I can backstitch, and I can go forward. All right. Let me pull that up and snip. So I know that my machine is stitching correctly. I also experimented so I could see this little back stitch. And if I do a buttonhole, I can use that stitch. So that's going to indicate what I'm doing here. All right, let's try to stitch around my Velcro. I'm just going to put my foot down and stitch this way, pivot, what we did, and stitch down. So I'll stitch the short end first, and I don't have to worry about pins, and I know it's straight on my garment. Wow, I don't know what I'm doing here, folks, because this is really going zigzag. I guess I should have looked it up. Maybe I have to get it out of that mode. That's it. Okay, then I get to the corner of my Velcro. I leave my needle in, and I lift up my presser foot, pivot, just like we did on the maze, put it down. So just be aware that sometimes your machine is going to get stuck and you need to help it along with your wheel. I'm lifting my presser foot each time. I go all the way around my Velcro. And at the end, I'll backstitch. And then I can go all the way up to lift up my presser foot, and then I clip my thread close to here. So I have ample thread to not unthread my needle. And then I clip my threads closer to my garment. I can take my bobbin, my basting out. And make her a little pile over here, okay? And let's see if I can pull my basting out. I think I actually stitched right over it, so I'm gonna have to encourage it to come out. Here it comes. Okay, so there's my basting all the way out. And here's my Velcro stitched on nice and flat. And then I just do the other side. I'm just taking my time getting my needle aligned in the corner so that it's stitching just a little bit away from the edge. Okay, and here we go. Pivot. I'm actually going to put it right in the corner because I went and I didn't want to go too far, so I'm just going to now place it, turn, press her foot down, stitch forward, pivot, press foot down, stitch forward. Okay. And I'm going to push my U-turn to go backwards to lock it in place. If you stitch over a thread, when you cross the thread, it helps lock it in place. And you do that a couple of times and you're secured. So I'm going to pull out and I'm going to clip my threads. And that's it for the Velcro, folks. No big mystery. Just stitch it on all the way around. You can zigzag it, which sometimes makes it more secure if you don't mind that look on the outside. This, whoops, this came out in one fell swoop. So there we go. The basting's out, it's stitched on, and then I make sure that I can secure it. The test of my piece is that with the snap, the hook and bar, and the Velcro, I don't have any big gaps. There's a gap here because that's where my hook is. It's just thick, okay? So it goes straight down. Now I'm ready to look at my buttonhole. Gonna stop, pause, record for a moment. Wait a minute, where am I? Here we go. Okay, let's just go back and we'll review the button, the sew through button, the 4-hole button, the shank button, and the same, which is true with the covered button, which is a piece of fabric cut. They give you a sample. They give you a pattern when you get a covered button. You fold that to the inside, and then you put a piece of metal here, which is also in your buttonhole kit, and it has the metal button loop. So it looks like this, but instead of metal, it's covered with fabric. Okay, how to measure your buttonhole width, how to make a buttonhole. And I have a prompt for this, so I will put this up on the Canvas site under, I guess I should put it under machine close. I'll just do a separate one for buttons. So you already saw a button on that. This is where your seam gauge is kind of important. As I've now made it in tornado so that I can't find my seam gauge. Okay. The reason why this is important is because I can actually measure my button. So we want the width, and I'll show you a button that's done. Here's a buttonhole, and here's a button. So this is what I mean by the button has been sewn on. It should be sewn on in the direction of the buttonhole. So it should be stitched on vertically so that it can then be put through the buttonhole with the least interruption possible. You'll see that it will slide through here. And it will rest flat because the button is lifted from the garment. So when I undo this, and I take it out, you'll see that the button is quite a bit off of the garment. So you can see how much it's away from the garment. That is a thread shank. I've wound the thread around. I'll show you how to do that. Here's my Velcro and my button. Now, the width of the button, I can put my ruler right on here and I can measure this button. This is 1/2 inch, but I need to accommodate the depth of the button as well. So 1/2 inch plus 1/8 inch is the size of my button hole. This buttonhole should be 5/8 of an inch, which is right here. Okay. Wow, everything's backwards. Sorry, you guys. So there's my 5/8. So the buttonhole formula for the size is width plus depth. Of button. Okay, so that, number one, equals the buttonhole size or length. Where you place the buttonhole is another thing entirely, and I'll demo that on this piece first. You place it half the diameter, okay, or half the width. So if this is a 1/2 inch, I place it half of that, which is 1/4 inch, plus 1/4. So I will put that formula on the board as well. Buttonhole placement. One-half the width of button. Diameter and width are the same. Plus 1/4. So this measurement plus 1/4. If this is the center front of my garment, I need to measure from here over half the width plus 1/4 inch. Why is that? Well, and the other, we'll talk about direction in a minute. Because if my button is not half, it will stick out over. So half of it places my buttonhole here, and my button will sit here. Right? If it's too close, my button will hang out. Does that make sense to everybody? You don't want your button when you're sewing it, when you've sewn it on, to hang out over your garment. You want it to be centered on your garment. Then there's a second choice about buttonhole direction.
So would it be easier to do the buttonhole first?
No, you have to do the buttonhole first.
Yeah.
You don't stick the button on first, but you have to have your button so that you can measure your button, right? Yeah. So buttonhole direction. So this gets quite technical. If you have a narrow strip, like on the front of a man's shirt, you're going to match the design of the garment and create a vertical buttonhole. If you have a casual opening, and maybe it's not a strip like this, and it goes forever, you can do a horizontal buttonhole. And then this is particularly important that you're half the distance away from when you start it, because if you stitch your button here and you get a little bit too tight on your garment, your button is going to go like this, right? Because there's the center of my button and it will extend over my garment. So that's why that half, the placement of the buttonhole is so important, that it's half the width plus 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And I'll put that. Away from edge. And the prompt that I have on Canvas will show you all this stuff. And you can fill it in. That will help you memorize it. So let me, you guys will probably do a vertical because you're working with a narrow piece. So I'm going to show you my sample. Again, this of course was done first. The buttonhole was done first. My button is 1/2 inch, so 1/4 inch away. Actually, you know what? It's plus. You could do a fat 1/8, but you can see that that is exactly 1/2 inch to the center of my buttonhole placement, so that when I button this, my button sits on the garment and does not, even if I pull it, it won't pull over the edge. Okay, so that's the placement. That's the size of the buttonhole, meaning the length, the placement of the buttonhole, and the direction of the buttonhole, whether it's vertical or horizontal. Does that seem clear to everybody? So I'm going to measure my button. Everyone has the same button. This is my strip. I'm going to do a vertical buttonhole on here. First, I'll throw my button on the floor. Very handy. What's the rule? Measure my button. I can actually just put this right on here and measure it right up. So doesn't this button seem so much bigger than this button? Right? But this is a 1/2 inch button and this is a 5/8 inch button. So that's why it's really important as a finishing part of your garment, you actually take into consideration, what is it going to look like with those buttons all marching down your garment? And I worked with a very famous costume designer here, actually. She came and did a show called Shakespeare and the Indians. And she said, you know, Pam, when I sit in the movie and I watch something and I'm bored, I count the number of buttons down the back. So let's not give her too many. And that is dependent on the size of the button. If the button's smaller, they're going to be closer together so that they get a good firm hold. That's very typical in period garments. Bigger buttons are more common in modern, and in the 60s, the buttons were gigantic. So then you maybe have 3 giant buttons, or on the front of a jacket, 3 giant buttons sticking down the front. So this is a 5/8 inch button width plus 1/8 of an inch depth. So I'm going to use that. That would be, I have to translate it into 16ths. So let's do that on the board. I think it's plus 1/8. So 5/16, 5/8 plus 1/8 is 6/8. And that would mean that's a half. Oh no. Yes. No, it's not. because if I do but divided by 2, that's a 3/4 inch. Okay, so your math does come in necessary. So my button length for this button, and you guys have the same, is going to be 3/4 of an inch. So it's going to be approximately this big. Okay, button plus depth. So I'm going to mark that on my piece. Let's go back to the table. Maybe I can do it right here because it's white on the ironing board. I'm working on my top piece, which has my insulation, which has my interfacing in it. Let me just go away from that light a bit. Okay. I need a 5/8 inch length, and I have to be half the distance of my button, which is going to be a little under 3/8. So about a 1/2 inch away. 3/8 plus 1/8 would be a 1/2 inch. So now I know where I'm going to mark my button. It's going to be a 1/2 inch away. So this is 1/2 inch away from the edge. I'm going to move it down away from my Velcro. I'm just using a pencil. And then it's going to be 3/4 inch long. So I'm going to mark that 3/4 inch long right here. And then I'm going to put an I-beam right on the end. And then I'll double check my measurement. Yes, I'm at 3/4 inch. So you'll see I've made a clear mark. I am 1/2 inch away from the edge of my garment, and I'm 3/4 inch long. So I've marked a stop at each end so that I can clearly see where I'm going to sew. So I am going to make the buttonhole before I sew the button on, because then I can get the correct placement. Okay, is everybody clear on that? Let's go back to our machine. If you download your instruction guide, you'll get something like this, and then you can actually look up instructions for your machine. And there's a little troubleshooting section, which every sewing machine book has this because everybody has trouble. It's just hard to create everything. So I'm going to show you the buttonhole choice. This has ornamental stitches. And let's see, buttonhole setting, number 22. Let's go there. Haha, here we go. So buttonhole setting. This one says attach the buttonhole foot, which I don't have. So I'm not going to be able to use that. I'm going to have to work with the measurements that I've been given. It helps to determine the length. So I have my length. Turn knob 25 to the buttonhole position here. So it's matched on my little square. And then I have to go back to this position for every buttonhole. Turn the knob clockwise only. So, you know, just like we have this turns towards you, this knob turns clockwise only. So I set it up so that it matches. The buttonhole and the buttonhole symbols are matching. And the stitches will be close together. So I am going to reduce the needle tension by 1 number. I'm going to just check on that. And then to look at the buttonhole, I'm going to stitch. The first one will start here and it will stitch towards me. I'm going to push button number 26 and keep it depressed until it's sewn 4 bar tacks this way. And then I'm going to sew the second seam and it will stitch away from me. And then I'm going to stitch 4 bar tacks. And this is the same way that almost all machines work. And before we had this buttonhole attachment, we could just simply stitch towards you and stitch across the back and then actually turn the fabric and then stitch the other way. Because they have this now buttonhole attachment, we can leave it, don't have to move our fabric. We stitch towards ourselves, do the bar tack, which is cross, and then stitch back and do a bar tack, and then it stitches in place. I'm going to put that on the board too, just so you can see it in grand view, because this is the way every single machine works, regardless of what you have. So I've got my line on my fabric. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I have my I-beam. This is where I'm going to start my needle position. It will zigzag towards me, very small. You don't want it to be so small that it stays in one place. So it's a little bit bigger than 0. When you get to the end, a bar tack is stitching it across the bottom, and then it will stitch the opposite direction. So Ezra, I have a buttonhole attachment that will work on your machine. Or Lois, no, it was Ezra. And then you'll do a bar tack across the bottom, then you remove it and it will stitch a straight stitch to lock it in place. If you only have a zigzag, you can simply set your zigzag to 0.5, less than 1, and stitch it towards you. Put your zigzag on wide, but still 0.1. Here, the stitch length is what I'm talking about, is 0.5. So it's less than 1. And I'm not talking inches, it's less than your 1 increment. And then your stitch width for number 1 and number 3 are the same, is, you know, about 1.25. Then your stitch width at the bar tack, which is number 2 and number 4. So this sews the first bead. And then the second one is the bar tack. And that stitch width is going to be probably 4, something like that, 4.5, 4. That's the width of your zigzag, but your length is always going to be very, very close together. So if all you have is a zigzag, you can make it work by getting to this point, reversing your fabric, and then stitching the rest of the way. The reason why this is so important is then after you get this stitched like this, you cut this open, and that bar tack, this makes the opening in the buttonhole, and that bar tack prevents this from ripping. Does that make sense to everybody? So let's see if I can do it. I'm going to do it on a sample first. I'll actually use this little piece for a sample so that you can see the color. And I'm going to have to figure it out because, like I said, I've never used this machine. I can do it on the Bernina, and I'll show you that as well. It'll work about the same way. Making sure I have both threads up. And see, now this is kind of crossed right here, so I want to always check my threading. Checking your threading is the very first thing you do if you have any kind of an issue at all. So I'm just going to see what's going on first by checking on my sample fabric. Again, put 3 layers of fabric together. Get rid of all these extraneous threads because they are what gets caught in your bobbin. So I'm going to cut all this stuff off so that I can take a look at what my machine's doing. Okay. Oh, I've got to go to this thing. Okay, it's absolutely doing what I want, which is great. And with my needle up, I'm going to do the bar tack. Let's see, what do I want to do? I think I want to go here. Oh yeah, there's a click. Okay, so I'll try the click. Okay, I'm going to go with the, I got to go all the way around. From there to there. So now I'm on the click. I'm going to make sure I'm on my bead still so I can take a look. Okay, sewing the width. I'm going to lift it up. Let's see how it's going to sew. Nope. Okay, I think I have to flip my fabric. That's my bar tack. So at the end of the bar tack, with my needle in, I'm going to flip my fabric. Then I should have a bead going the other direction. Let's see. Okay, and the last bead and up and lock in place. Okay. So it's a sample. It's not fabulous, but that gives me a lot of information. That's why you want to do a sample. Okay. So the first bead towards me, I had to flip it so I could do the second bead and then do the bar tack. I want to work out why this is not even. Okay. And I think it would be even. I just need to get better instructions on this. So I will also now go to the Bernina machine. Because the Bernina machine has something a little bit different and you want to pay attention to this. My Bernina is plugged in. I'll pull this out. I have an extraneous thread here that I want to get rid of. Okay, when you're working on the Bernina machine, you have this little finger that sticks up, and in that finger is a hole. See the hole through here? You need to thread. So if you need to look at your bobbin, I'm going to have to wind this up a bit. It's too long. Look at your bobbin case. If your bobbin has a finger that comes up and has a hole, that hole needs to be threaded for tension. That other machine said you need to change the tension, but on the Bernina, they self-change the tension. So I'm going through here, through my slot, up through my spring, and then I'm going to thread from this side through the hole. So you can see that I'm threading through the hole of the bobbin. I have a thread hanging off the end of this, so that's not going to work. Okay. So check your bobbin case and see if you have this hole threading off the end. And I will thread the bobbin. And now it is sticking up through there. So it again threads from this side towards what will be the front. And then it comes out the front. Then I can place this bobbin back into my machine. And I will engage my top thread and pull my bobbin thread up. Same as always, but now I have this little bit of extra tension on the bobbin thread. Again, this one still seems to be kind of wet. I'm going to use this buttonhole knob, and we're going to look at that up close. You start at the 0. This is the uniform buttonhole symbol. Start at 0. When you go to 1, notice that it turns all of these. It takes it to a narrow width. I should already have my stitch length. You go to 0 and you do half a turn back so that you're between the 0 and the 1. So I'm at 1. I'm doing my test with my needle up. Then I will go, here shows me my symbol. This is going to sew the bead towards me. 2 sews the bead across the bottom. So it's going to be a wider width. Sorry, this is the wider width. Okay, just a second. That's the wider width. That locks it in place. Okay, so 1, we're going to sew the bead towards us. 2, it's on 0. It's 0 width. It's going to lock it in place. 3, it's going to do the bar tack, and it's on the number 5 width right here. 4, it's going to sew the bead backwards at 2. 5, it's going to sew the width. And 6, it's going to lock it in place. So your machine may have this. And I think that the FOF does have this. So make sure that you look up your buttonhole instructions on your machine. So now I will try this by drawing my buttonhole on this fabric, which I need to have 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to measure it so that it's the right distance away. And I'll do my eye on both ends. Here's my mark. Remember, this is my sample. I'm just going to try it as a sample so that I'm on 0 and I can get my needle bar placed exactly at the eye right here. So I'm looking through the hole of my buttonhole foot. The buttonhole foot generally has a little bit wider opening. I know I'm in the right place. I have my length correct. I can go to number 1. And again, I don't want to have my needle in while I'm moving this. I just put my needle in at 0 for placement. And now I'm going to watch that it stitches down my bar. Stitch in place. Oh no, I know what it does. Because they want to stitch directionally, this straight stitch stitches it all the way back. So we'll do that. Don't do this in real life, but I'm going to show you this stitch so that you see what it looks like. So it doesn't stitch it in place. That's why you always want to do a sample. So I stitched my bead and then it stitched a straight stitch on the way back. Oh, just a second, if I can get it in here. So you can see that straight stitch down the side. So that then when I put my needle back in, I have to make it even here. It will bar tack across the bottom first because I'm going to turn it, and it will bar tack here, which is going to be the wider one, right? The wider one at the 0 in place. And then it's going to come back up this other side. Then I'm going to bar tack. And then I'm going to lock it in place. And I'll lift it out. Clip my threads. Okay. So this is my sample buttonhole. And I can decide whether I want my stitches closer together. I can decide, I wouldn't take it out. That's why there's a little glitch right there. You can see on the bottom that this zigzag stays completely aligned. And now I need to cut my buttonhole open. One thing you do not want to do is you do not want to get a seam ripper. It seems like, wow, it's such a great thing. A seam ripper has a blade right here. And you don't want to get a seam ripper and do this, because if you go like this and push, you're likely to cut through the end of that mark. So I'm going to show you the way that I like to do it, which is we have a small cutting device. Okay, well, that's a fail. Normally we have a small cutting device here, which is a plastic mat. So I'm going to cut on a piece of wood, and that's fairly common. So you can get a piece of wood, lay it underneath, put your buttonhole there. And then I use a single edge razor blade. We have so much stuff in here, I can hardly move. So a single edge razor blade comes with a piece on it, and you cut from the end to the center and from the end to the center. So I will cut from the end to the center and the end to the center. Make sure your fingers are not in the way of the blade, and that you're not cutting your threads. Okay, so that is a bead that I can simply cut off, because you will have an extraneous thread there. And now I can put my button in. Okay, I've lost my blue button. I'm really a mess today. But I can show you that this button would then button through and rest, okay? See how the buttonhole moves? So that's why you want to do it that way. If you don't have a blade, you can fold your buttonhole in half, and with small scissors, not these These have a great point, so I can use them. I can clip the center to make a hole, and then I can clip very carefully inside to make that work. I'll do it on my sample one for you. So here's my sample. I can clip right in the center, make a small hole, and then I can clip to the edge and clip to the edge. But you want to be really careful that you're not cutting the bead, okay? All right, I'm sure you have many questions. And now's the time for you guys to sew. You have about an hour. So if you've done your seams, we can go right on to your buttonhole and we can find out how that's going to look. Questions? Everyone's totally asleep and bored.
Just a comment more than a question. Buttons for me have always been very fun because a lot of them are very, very beautiful.
Yes.
Almost like jewelry, really. And they're utilitarian, but they also can just really make a garment very special.
So instead of saying utilitarian, you can say functional. They function, and yet this is the Bauhaus method from that started in the 20s, is that functionality should be beautiful. And buttons can actually really set off the design of your garment. In Santa Barbara, sorry, I'm pinning my piece back together, this one. In Santa Barbara, we really have very few sources for fabric. Grant House, our sewing machine guy, is on the corner of Coda and Coda and Salsa Puedes, and he has some buttons. But Fine Fabrics, which is next to the Arlington Theater, has buttons that they probably start at $7.50 per button, and they can go up. I've bought buttons that were $25 a piece. So they can be a real work of art, and it's worth it to get a good button. So we'll talk about sewing the button on next time because I want you to be able to have time to work. So how are you guys doing? Let's go down the list and you tell me where you're at with your seams or your hand sewing. So Catherine, we'll start with you. You're first up on my list.
I'm good. I think I'm in good shape.
Okay.
I'm actually going to have to sign off here in a few minutes. I have to go to an appointment, but
good. So feel free to reach out via email if you need help with your buttonholes.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, Ashley, how about you? And actually your whole team that's together, if Corin's still there, you guys can both be visually present so that we can see you working on your machine. And did you download your thread guide for your machine, and have you looked up your buttonhole guide?
Right now I'm catching up from everything from Monday, and then I'm going to be done by hopefully before rehearsals this evening.
Okay, well, you're lucky because I can see you and you can ask me.
Okay.
What is your machine?
I have the FAF.
Yeah, but what's the number?
1222.
Okay, and no number after it. I'm just gonna Google buttonhole instructions so that we can see what they are. Okay, and how are you doing, Corin?
Sorry, I had to walk upstairs. My computer was gonna die, but I'm pretty much at the same place as Ashley. I still have a little bit of catching up to do, but then I will work on sewing the buttons.
Okay. All right. Let me go back to my screen. I want to show all you FAF people. This would be Victoria as well, and I'll post this on the buttonhole page. I just said buttonhole instructions. Let's take a look at this. So here's the Mike FAF 1222 mail a repair, but he's going to show us how to do buttonhole.
Hi, Ken back here again with another FAF mail repair.
So here you
This
are.
is Mikey's machine.
So this is your machine. You guys have a little video, and here's your dial, your on button, your pedals. So this shows exactly what it is. The one that I'm working on is a 1222E.
And hey, Mikey, you'll like it. Gotta love them old Life cereal commercials. This machine, okay, is a 1222. And as
So there's a great video
back,
for you
so
guys. I'll
the
post it.
fingers in there.
Wait, I thought I was stopping share. Let's see here. Okay, so I'll post that on our Buttonhole page so that you guys have that, but everyone should be able to look up their machine. And how about you? So Cara, your machine's probably going to be like the Bernina I did the buttonhole on second. When you get your bobbin. And does your bobbin case have that little hole in it in the finger?
Yeah.
Okay, so you really want to thread that. Miranda, what machine are you working on?
Hi, I'm working on my mom's one. It's called Husqvarna Viking, and
Yes,
okay, and it's
great machine. And
nice.
what's the number?
What's the number?
It should be on the machine. See how this one says 1005 and the FOF had it in the same place?
My number says 300.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly, while we're chatting here, I'll look up Viking 300.
Okay.
And just see Viking 300 sewing machine. And there's a sewing machine manual
Okay.
so that you can actually look it up. User's guide. And let me just screen share so I can also print this one. I'll just show it for you. So I didn't look up your whole user's guide, but here it is. And then we could look inside this. Does it look somewhat like this?
It doesn't have that like
Blue.
Yeah, it doesn't have that.
Yeah, I'm sure they put on all the bells and whistles one on here. So, but you can actually also just look up, I'm going to look up Viking 300 buttonhole instructions because I actually have Viking instructions that I will post.
Okay.
And here we go. This is epic. So you can take your pick, how to do a manual buttonhole, how to do, this is an Epic 980, how to use an automatic buttonhole foot. So we can just, look at it here. And that
Hello, I'm Anika from Made to Sew.
So this
in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do a manual buttonhole.
So this way you can find whichever one is going to be the best buttonhole for you guys. Okay.
Cool.
All right, Smenson, what kind of machine do you have? Okay. Victoria, you have a FOF, so do look up, and yours is 1222 as well, so look up the Mikey one. I will post those now, okay? I'm going to pause recording and allow you guys to work.